rough, as if they're separate rocks. One of them is placed right over the bend in the wall, which of course is impossible. In other words, he has misunderstood a feature of the building of walls, whether he's from a different place or somehow got it wrong. This is the kind of thing that I see as definitive, really, in showing the hand of the copyist. Here, another detail from the Kansas City scroll, in which here again, stones piled against large stones piled against the bottom of the wall. The drawing of the architecture here is also very kind of schematic and flattening. Well, the Nelson Gallery scroll is published in the Eight Dynasties catalog, number 152 in the catalog, and Mark Wilson, writing about it. Mark Wilson, who was for many years the director and old friend, good guy. On page 184, he writes of the scroll that I bought for my stepfather, that is the Schrenker-Oberon version, as, quote, painted on reddish-brown dyed silk, that is silk faked to look old, and, quote, inarticulate and unschooled brushwork that, quote, suggests an inexperienced painter. Okay, that shows two people having a very different view of this painting, or of the relationship between these two paintings. Now, here next, please. Here is a detail of the upper, further up on the hillside from the Kansas City scroll. Now, here we probably should be able to tell even from this, or I would say, Mark Wilson and others, of course, will differ, say that this shows it to be the copy, because it's the way the trees are drawn, flattening and repetitive and so on. The way these little outcroppings of rock are drawn, same way, don't really render three-dimensional form, and the waterfall over on the right, it's all flattening. Okay, anyway. Now here, next, finally, another version of this scroll is in the Palace Museum in Beijing. Excuse me, Palace Museum in Taiwan. And this was published by Zhang Zhaoshun, very fine curator, who did a serious study of Wu school painting, Suzhou school painting, publishes the original. He took this to be the original. Now, if we can zero in again on the rocks against the wall, this must be a copy of the Kansas City scroll, I think, because the artist here has not only understood them as piled against the wall with lower contour, not straight, and various dots to that, but he has drawn shading behind them to set them off from the wall, to make them stand out from the wall. Okay, he has taken it from the Kansas City scroll, presumably, or from something like it, and has made it clearer that the stones are piled up against the base of the wall, the same way back in the middle right here. Okay, but this seems to me a fairly clear-cut case of copy and a copy of a copy. Okay then, so much for that one. Now, going on to another very important case. Here is a large painting in the Palace Museum in Taipei, supposed to be by the Middle Ming artist Du Jin, active in Nanjing, a professional artist. I have a long section on him in my book on Ming painting. Very interesting artist. Specialist in, figure painting, but also landscape of the figures. Titled Enjoying Antiquities, showing two scholars, one of them seated in the middle, and then his guest, presumably, to the left of him, looking at antique bronzes on a table. So this scholar, who is a rich collector, has invited his friend to come and eat and drink with him and enjoy antiquities. And down in the lower left is a servant who is bringing scroll paintings for them to look at, or another scroll painting. Up in the upper right are two women on opposite sides of a table who are unwrapping a chin. One of them is presumably going to play on the chin. And they're preparing also, I think, things for... Well, I'm not sure what they're preparing. We'll see details of that. And then down on the right here is a boy, a little servant boy with a fan trying to catch a butterfly by the flowers. Okay, a lovely big painting, and probably mounted on a screen originally, from the size of it and the shape of it. Now, I published this in my book on Ming painting. This is reproduced in the Possessing the Past catalog, by the way, the exhibition at the Met from the National Palace Museum in Taipei. And it's there accepted. Richard Barnhart writes about it and accepts it as a genuine work by Du Jin. I had published it earlier, however, in my book on Ming painting, Parting at the Shore, figure 73, presenting it as probably a copy by some Suzhou artist, somebody close to Chu Ying, maybe Chu Ying himself. And various things about the painting persuaded me that it was not the original, but a copy. Let's look at a couple details, first of all. I'm not saying that you can tell from the painting itself easily, or from the details. There are things that might make you wonder, sort of flattening drawing of the drapery folds, and I don't know, various other. Here's the two figures enjoying the antiques. There are numbers of paintings of this from the Ming Dynasty. It's a favorite topic. Old people or just elegant scholars enjoying antiquities, admiring each other's collections. People did get together in the Ming to look at each other's collections. Okay, and here even closer up. And you could, if you wanted to, try to identify the various bronzes, match them up with existing bronze vessels. This is okay, something worth doing. But I'm not trying that here. Now the next, please. Okay, here in a very unclear photograph with a little table in front, one of the reasons that I questioned the big Palace Museum complete picture was that I had found in Japan and photographed another version of the left 1/3 of it, the left section, in which you see the servant bringing a scroll and a table and a little table with stuff on it. Now this is hanging in the tokonoma, or the alcove, of all places, in one of the big galleries in the Kongo-buji. Kongo-buji is a great esoteric Buddhist temple on Koyasan, Mount Koya, in Japan. I think I talked about this in some connection. It used to be hard to reach and wonderfully quiet and mysterious, and now it's overrun by tourists apparently. But they built roads up there. But anyway, leaving that aside, I was up there around 1970, and in the Kongo-buji, I saw in the distance this painting, a dark silk painting, hanging in the tokonoma on the far wall. And I asked our guide if I could if I could go across the room and look at it, maybe photograph it. He said, "Sure, go ahead." So I think we had to get permission from the temple authorities. We did, and I made this photograph. And then the next, please. Here's a better something made from my negative. Well, as you see, here, let's put beside it. Yes, the next, please. Here's the corresponding section of the Palace Museum picture. Now, in the Kongo-buji version, by the way, we've tried to locate that painting ever since, and it's not in the temple collection. It was just lent to them probably by some, maybe the family of one of the monks, or who knows, or some believer who lent them a painting to hang in their tokonoma. It isn't anything like a great Buddhist temple is going to have in its collection. And nobody's ever been able to find it again. So we know it only from the photograph. But here we are. Now, in the Kongo-buji version, you see the banana palms are, well, various things. I would read the leaves of the banana palms as more convincingly occupying space, and the others as more flattened and having the qualities of the copy. Same way for the stalks of them. One of my students was Charles Mason, and his wife was a specialist in garden plants, very knowledgeable on how to grow them and so on. And she pointed out, seeing this, that in the Palace Museum version, that is what I take to be the copy, they are planted right up against the concrete or stone slabs that make under the railing. And if you planted the trees that close to the stone slabs, they're not going to grow. Their roots have no space to grow in. Okay, whereas in the other one, as you see, they're spaced more sensibly out in the earth, out beyond the railings. Okay, and then the question of the next, please. the calligraphy, I don't pretend to be a specialist or good enough in calligraphy to make the judgments. The calligraphy of the Kongo Buji version looks better to me, but I only say looks in a rather vague way. But you do see here the drawing of the leaves of the banana palm. We had one growing in our backyard and house in Berkeley, so I was able to see how they grow and really understand how the leaves tatter and all these things. Okay, the next. Then, as this argument was going on, then another version of the right one-third of this, with the two women at the table preparing, unwrapping the chin and so forth, appeared in a New York auction in the 1990s. Now, all this, there's something which I have reference to in my on my handout called the Great Dujin Correspondence, something like that. Dick Barnhart and Stephen Little, who had been his student, and Maxwell Hearn of the Met, all argued the other way. So the Palace Museum picture was the real thing. And I had some long correspondence with them. I was arguing it was a copy and why. So all this, eventually, it seemed so valuable to the field to get our various opinions down this way that I persuaded them to let us publish it all. And Howard Rogers published it in his journal, Kaikodo Journal. Okay, anyway, that's all there on the in your reading or in the ad lib. I'm only suggesting if you want to, you can read it. At any rate, they were arguing that the Palace Museum version is the original. I was arguing that the one in the Kongo Buji of the left section and this one in the new auction painting, which has just turned up in New York, of the right section, were somehow closer to the original. I'm not saying they go together or they're part of the original or whatever, but these seem to be the real thing, and the other isn't. The other is definitely a copy for me. Okay, at any rate, this section at the right, this was eventually bought by the Yale Art Gallery by Dick Barnhart, even though he differed from me on the priority of these and so on. He had the very good sense, I think, to buy it for the Yale Art Gallery, and that's where it is now. It had some dumb old attribution to Zhou Wenju or something stupid like that. But it could be from the original Dujin. And at any rate, it's much better, I think, than the other version. Okay. Now, let's see. Here's the same thing in black and white. The upper part of it is different. A large garden rock and banana palms and so on. So it isn't exactly the same in composition, but it's obviously the same, based on the same basic composition. Okay, here is the two figures from the version now in Yale, the better versions, I take it, and the two women, in my reading at least, are more, in the ways I've been talking about all through this, more volumetric, more readable as real bodies under the robes, and more readable as space between them, and so on in every way. Here, even closer up, the drawing of the drapery. Well, I've shown numbers of cases of this now, where the drapery seems to be believable as going over a solid body, and there is a real form under the drapery, so it's not simply flattening. Here's just a slide of the upper part with bamboo hanging over, and the ornamental rock and the banana palms again. These are not in the other one, so there's nothing to compare it with. But the drawing of the screen behind, as you see it, as a woven screen pattern down below, painted by the artist, is really quite convincing and good. And let's see now here. Yes, here's the. This is the corresponding section, a black and white slide, a black and white photograph of the corresponding section in the Taipei version, in which the figures, to my eye, are not so believably